I'll flip these pretty quickly. This is the Bradwood site on the lower right. It's a beautiful site. It's critical salmon habitat. So that's another huge issue, just the environmental impact of these projects. To build the Bradwood LNG terminal, they would have to dredge out that site right there. To explain liquefied natural gas just a little bit more, why we see it paralleling oil in its impacts has to do with how it's produced and shipped. LNG is gas that's drilled somewhere overseas, shipped across the ocean, drilled somewhere, then supercooled, which is an energy-intensive process, and then shipped across the ocean, and then regasified.
Probably electric energy intensive to gas it.
Yeah, it is, very much. And then in shipping it, which is a huge energy penalty, there's a lot of diesel fuel that gets burned shipping it. So this was an engineer actually from California did this schematic of the Jordan Cove Energy Project, sort of looking at the energy penalty at each step. And you end up with something that's 25 to 30% worse than natural gas, because you have to ship it this huge distance, you have to refine the product in terms of cooling it down, shipping it, regasifying it, all of that. Those processes carry both a financial and a greenhouse gas element with them. And because of that, Oregon Department of Energy and other independent reviewers have looked at this issue and said, look, LNG can be as bad as coal. If we're talking about getting LNG from the Middle East, which is the largest growing supply area, that coming to North America would be about as bad as coal because it's so expensive and greenhouse gas intensive to ship it. The second piece of that is the other thing I pointed out here, it's very expensive. Liquefied natural gas is a key source of natural gas for countries that don't have their own supply. Countries like Japan and South Korea and others are looking at LNG. Western Europe right now is going to be jumping into the LNG spot market because Russia just turned off the gas spigot coming to Ukraine. So to the extent that the west coast of the United States bought into LNG, we'd be buying into the same sort of unstable, geopolitically influenced energy market that we see with oil. In fact, there's a gas cartel forming right now between Russia, Iran, and Qatar. These are the biggest gas producers in the world, and they want to control the price of gas. And to quote the Russian energy minister, the era of cheap gas is over. That's kind of the overview of what's going on. And then really quickly, I want to go through the projects because these have gotten confusing, and I think it's important for people to understand what's proposed. The black dotted line in the center of the screen is the proposed Palomar gas pipeline. It's 36 inches in width, proposed, or in diameter, I should say. And that would connect either of two proposed LNG terminals in the Columbia River to that big blue pipeline, which is on the right of that screen. And that big blue pipeline is owned by TransCanada, and it's existing. It's in the ground. The red lines on this screen are also our existing pipeline infrastructure. That's where we get gas now. What's proposed with Palomar is a huge foreign fossil fuel highway to California, essentially. And it would connect the Bradwood LNG terminal, which is shown in yellow, to a California market that is about 10 times the size of Oregon's gas market. It could also connect the proposed Oregon LNG terminal to California. So the two dots shown on the Columbia River are proposals to import the liquid gas and send it south. And that's the Jordan Cove proposal, which has its own proposed pipeline called the Pacific Connector Gas Pipeline. That's another 36-inch pipeline, and it goes 230 miles straight to the California border. So it's fairly clear what's going on with that one. So those are the proposals. What's really interesting is that they're not alone. They've been joined now by proposals to bring gas from east to west from the Rockies, sort of competing with LNG. And one of those is called Ruby. The others are called Sunstone and Blue Bridge. When you put all this together, you get 1,000 miles of pipeline. Oregon Department of Energy has really concluded that if we ever want more gas in the future, the better option are these Rockies gas pipelines because at least it's domestic gas. Frankly, I don't think any of them are a good idea. I think now is the time to move towards renewable energy, conservation, efficiency aggressively. And that's where a lot of people are right now. So the process for these, you asked earlier, can't Oregon just say no? And that's where we are. We're at the point where we need Oregon to stand up and say no, because FERC is in all likelihood going to next week reject Columbia Riverkeeper's petition against the Brad project. So that's going to be an important step where we're going to need the state to be a bulwark against these projects. We'll challenge FERC's decision, probably in court, because it's a bad decision. They didn't do a good environmental analysis. But we fully expect next week that they will reject that challenge and also reject the state of Oregon's challenge. The state of Oregon stood up and said they didn't do a good job. So Oregon agencies have a big hand in this. They can issue permits. If they refuse to issue those permits, there's no project. Brad was the most advanced in its permitting, and Coos Bay, Palomar, and Oregon LNG are sort of nipping at its heels right behind and all trying to get further along in the FERC process and get their state permits. So that's kind of where we are. Next week is a big week. On the same day that we have the rally, we could get a land use decision that could also basically, at least temporarily stop the Bradwood project, and that they won't have their needed permits at the local level. So there's been, a lot of wrangling over the authority that FERC has, the federal government, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, versus the state, and we think that the authority lies with the state to do the right thing. And the other important part about FERC, I would add, is that with the new administration, we're really hoping that we see FERC go in a different direction and not approve every LNG terminal that comes across its desk.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at each of these projects, these are 3 projects, each of whom have twice the capacity that we use on an average day in Oregon for gas. So they're regionally significant projects, and there are 3 of them proposed in Oregon, and there's hundreds of miles of pipeline. So it's gotten to the fiasco stage of the process now, where people are throwing up their hands and saying, we can't even keep track anymore with how much gas is proposed to come into this state.
So this Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is it part of the Federal Department of Energy?
It's an independently named commission. It's named by the president, and the commissioners are approved by the Senate. And the current commission makeup is one that has been very friendly to the LNG industry. The current chair has just decided to step down. What's fascinating is the chair decided to step down on January 20th. In the meantime, on January 15th, the Bradwood LNG case will be on the FERC docket. So the commissioners will meet and potentially make a final decision on Bradwood. And it's not hard to imagine this is sort of a final outgoing gift for the energy industry, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Joseph Kelleher, who is stepping down, has been consistently known for putting corporate interests over the public interest and kind of ignoring very valid challenges and public concerns. There's a wealth of websites out there that you can go to get information on this. NoLNG.net is kind of the clearinghouse for the local kind of Oregon communities who are dealing with it. LNGpollutes.org is also really good. ColumbiaRiverkeeper.org is sort of being reworked right now, so it's not as maybe up to date as the other 2. So LNGpollutes.org has got a lot of really good information about the conflict between liquefied natural gas and renewable energy. In California, where most of this gas would go, it's a head-to-head conflict. Because you've got natural gas, and you've got LNG, you've got natural gas, which is where they get a lot of their electricity, and a growing renewables sector, and those 2 things are kind of butting heads right now. And if they buy into a whole bunch more natural gas and build a bunch more natural gas power plants, that's renewable energy they're not building, because the ratepayers, you've only got so many cents in your energy dollar. If you throw 50% of it at LNG, it's that much less you have to put into the resources we want. So one of the things that bothers a lot of people and myself about looking at our oil infrastructure, our oil-based infrastructure, is you don't see the impacts of what happens overseas where it comes from. You can't see all the things that are hidden, and getting that oil to you and getting in your car and driving around. For liquefied natural gas, it's the same problem. It's the same pattern. What we have now is we're seeing these proposals for pipelines and terminals, and the impacts we're seeing here to farmers, to fishermen, to fish runs, to fish habitat that are extremely severe. I mean, you can't dredge out a hole in the Columbia River in the middle of critical salmon habitat and not expect to put another ding, in the potential existence of salmon.